My name is Derek Sheridan, and I'm the owner of Rust Belt Basketball Coaches Network. We recently fielded a question from one of our subscribers asking what my favorite continuity offense was versus switching high pressure man-to-man defense. And to begin with, I wasn't a continuity offense coach. Everything we did was motion based. So we didn't necessarily have something in place such as flex versus switching, which there's nothing wrong with flex versus switching, but we were more open concept with teaching motion principles versus man-to-man defense, whether it be pack line or up the line, on the line pressure defense. And switching is an issue with motion. So we gave our players clearly defined rules and spent a lot of practice time in regards to how to combat switching. We do have a video on our website, www.myrustbeltbasketball.com, where we go into greater detail and discuss how we combat switching. But for this video, the first alignment I'm going to show you is what we called hero. And two would start off being in what we called the hero position. And I have drawn a high school volleyball court, or the bottom half of that court, and we wanted our 4-man and 5-man to be positioned above that volleyball court. Our point guard and our 3-man were typically who we had bring the ball up the court, and you can start to your hero anywhere you wish. You can start him in the corner. We left it up to him. We practiced this a lot. So we told him he can start wherever he wanted. He could stack up with 4. He could stack up with 5. He could start on one of the blocks. He could even start out on the perimeter. But once the ball is brought to the trigger line, which is the top volleyball court, we wanted to get a reversal or get a swing, and that put our hero in motion. So our 2-man's going to cut under the rim. Here's your screen. Now this is switching, so we want the screen to be set wide and high off the baseline and off the lane line, because you've got to keep in mind 1 and 3 are in high pressure situations. They're more than likely getting forced towards the sideline, and the ball pressure is intense. So to start the game off, we always wanted 2 to go ball side. So his shape up here, or his misdirection, he always wanted to run up 4 first, and the amount of offensive chatter our players had was crucial. And what that means is we wanted them talking just as much on offense or more as they did on defense. Offensive chatter is something that is so important to your motion offense. So 2 is going to shape up, and he's going to cut off of 5. You know, we always wanted his cuts versus switching to round off to the ball or fade. Now 5's job is to pin X2 on this switch as deeply as he can and show himself to the ball handler. 4 is staying high and wide, and that's not to say if X4 went over the midline to help that he couldn't cut up in this area. But we are looking right there for 5. That is our first look. If 3 cannot throw the ball to 2 or 5, and against a high pressure defense, he more than likely is not going to be able to throw the ball to the 2-man, the cutter. So one of 2 things can happen here to get the ball to the other side of the midline. 1, if 3 can hit 1, that's advantageous. 3 might have to dribble the thing over if he's not being pinned to the sideline. Four can cut up the gut and help. And that's a great action, because now we're going to get a back screen. 3 would widen out. 1 would widen out. And on this back screen, you got to remember they're going to switch. So we're going to set a kickback screen, which is a screen, rescreen. 5 would slip it. The key for 5 is once he cannot see the 2-man's heels, he slips to the rim. There's your high-low. There might be confusion. We might actually be able to get it to 2, and I think it's crucial that you find ways to penetrate versus switching. We want 2 to look to drive his man unless he is wide open. Now, he's our best player. He's our best shooter. We can put it on the deck and create. But those are some examples of how we combated switching with Hero. If the defense will allow us to swing the ball via the pass, then you've got your 2, 5, and 4 on the flight of the ball. There's a switch. There's a roll back to the middle. 2 can continue. Here's the second screen. There's your flash to the ball. On this action here, on this flash to the ball, we really like hitting the screener and then sending him backdoor for a layup. We got a lot of mileage out of that move versus switching. So that's a summation of what we called Hero. I know Coach Knight called it baseline. We would also, versus switching, run the same ordeal, but we would have our post players on the same side of the floor. And we simply called this doubles. And Coach Steve Whitty, the legendary Hall of Fame coach from Indiana, from Ben Davis High School, popularized this to the point where you could be up in Hammond or all the way down in Jeffersonville, which are exact opposite ends of the state, and see teams executing doubles. So it's the same ordeal. 1 and 3 have got to find a way to get it reversed, whether it's via the pass or dribble looping. But 2's going to go off of this double. The low man, so we've got a dribble loop action. The low man goes high, and the top double seals. So we could go from 1 to 5, 1 to 2 to 5 for that high-low, and then 3 is going to stretch the court for a kick and a drive here. And there are some times where we even got that back door from 5 to 3. And how the players operate on a ball reversal. So the ball's going to transverse the midline. So let's say 2 kicked it back to 1, or penetrated the seam and kicked it to 1, or hit 3. There's your shape up. We typically wanted him going under that, but we didn't mess with him too much if they made a good read. There's your 2. He might stop here and seal. But now, once 4 and 5 follow the rule, now here comes 4, and there goes 5, sealing in that action. We like that a lot. It's a simple adjustment from Hero to stack the 4 and 5 up and utilize doubles. A couple other things that we got a lot of miles out of versus the switch was what Coach Knight and Coach Dick Bennett called triangle. 1, 3. You can align your triangle as such, or you can invert your triangle like the University of Virginia did when Tony Bennett was their head coach, and utilize an inverted triangle. And typically, versus switching, we used the inverted triangle. One's going to dribble the thing, foul line extended, and that's what keys the action here. Now, this is motion, so there isn't a policy or a strict policy for what the players have to do. It all boils down to the ball hitting the trigger line, which is foul line extended in this set, and offensive chatter. So once the ball hits here, 3 is going to stretch the floor. The players are going to utilize 1 and 3. Our feeders are going to use the diagonal rule. They're looking for spot up 3-point shots and driving opportunities. So once one gets to the foul line, he is not picking his dribble up until he has an open player to throw it to. As one nears the foul line extended, that's when we go into motion. 2 could screen for 4. 5 then could screen for 2. You could have, and again, this is via offensive chatter, 5 might call for the 4-man. And that would send 2 to the corner. Pop back. There's your high-low. Maybe you can hit the corner. Now you've got a nice ball side triangle. So the options with the 3 players in the triangle are innumerable. They have freedom to go where they wish. And again, it all boils down to the ball being in the right location and offensive chatter. You can also utilize a lot of sets. We utilized a ton of quick hitting set actions versus teams who switched as well. So let's go back to the triangle. And let's say we've got it inverted again. And 2's your hero. He can align wherever he wishes. He can start here. He can start here. He can stack up. He can start out here. It's up to him where he goes. To start this offense, or meaning when we started teaching it, we would align them in a triangle. So let's say the ball is swung or looped with the dribble, and as 3 nears that foul line extended, and 1's going to execute the diagonal rule. So as the ball nears the foul line extended area, which is our trigger spot, now we're in motion. 4 could call for 2. And one of the things we really like to do versus switching or versus mismatches is what we called CTS. And from the bench, we might call out Central Texas State, CTS, which is an acronym for curl to screen, curl to screen. So here's your shape up. He might be 5, a great example of offensive chatter. 5 might be screaming for 2. And he shapes up, and then he hightails it. He turns, and as he curls, he's going to find X4 and screen X4. And now 4 is going to loop around to the ball. 4 has it here. You might have a pickup jump shot. 5 is sealing, burying his man. So you have a nice high-low. So those are some options out of triangle. No matter if you want your triangle as such, or if you want to invert it. Lastly, we used what Coach Knight called T. Brooks Miller, who just left Trine University to be the associate head coach at Central Michigan with Coach Andy Brachima. At Trine, Brooks was masterful utilizing both triangle and T. Pat Knight at Marian University in Indianapolis is also masterful at teaching these offenses. So let's talk about T. In T, we've got the triangle widened out. And from here, 1 and 3 are not going to utilize the diagonal rule. 1 and 3's mindset is they're going to play 2 versus 2 above the foul line extended, looking for driving lanes. 2, 4, and 5 are going to play 3 on 3. That means as 1 cross the trigger line, which is that top volleyball line, or as he's in the, when he is in the motion of crossing that trigger line, we have a ton of offensive chatter. We might have 2 shape up hard at 4, and there's your slip. If the ball goes to 5, 4 is going to dive in here and just pile drive his man and look for the high-low. If 3, I should say X3, gets on that midline and sinks to help on that, then 5 could kick it to 3 or 1 to 3. And now 3 can hit this seam. That would put 2 back in motion. And so think of triangle with 1 and 3 not utilizing the diagonal rule. And we got a lot of miles versus switching against that. I think the alignment of offense gives the top players, whether you're in hero, triangle, doubles, or T, I think the top players have great angles to hit the players who are slipping or sealing to the rim. Again, you want your kids going to the rim when they seal. And that's something that's vitally important. You want to get as many natural high-lows as you can. Another thing that you might like out of any of these offenses is the vertical cut. So as you have 1 and 3, and let's say we're in T. And 4's decided to start or stack with 5. Is the ball swung or dribble looped? 4's pinning down for 2. And he cuts vertically. And again, he's our hero. Once the ball, and this was just us, we didn't necessarily steal this from anybody, this was just out of necessity for us. Once the hero caught the ball against switching, so he's guarded by X4, who at most of the places where I coached was going to be a bigger player. That automatically triggered us into 1-4 low. For our 2-man, we didn't screen on the ball when we went 1-4 low. We wanted 2, and we spent a lot of time in practice on this, to catch, square, rip, shot fake, jab. He was going to attack X4's top foot, find a way to get to the basket. You've got 5 and 4 sealing. They are also in paramount offensive rebounding position, as their defensive players will be above them. So if 2 gets to the volleyball line and pulls up and shoots it, 4 and 5 are going to rail their men, and they have fantastic offensive rebounding position. One of our favorite ways, we had 2 sets that we ran. Well, we had more than 2, but this is one of our favorites that we ran versus teams who 5-man switched, which means all 5 guys freely switched. And we stole that term from Rick Majerus a long time ago. But anyway, so this is a set that Casey Jones, while he was coaching the Boston Celtics, made famous as when they had Larry Bird. So this is our basic setup. And one's going to bring the ball just across the top volleyball line and veer just slightly outside of the pro spot on the left side of the floor. And 3's going to cut in, and 5's going to screen for 3. And a lot of times, even though it's a 5-man switching defense, 5 and 3 won't switch. Our 3-man was typically a smaller player, but 5 more than likely is going to knock the heck out of 3 as he goes over the top there. We called that a Spartan cut, made famous by Tom Izzo. So once the ball's in the air to 3, 2 is gone. He's out of that stack and gets as far down the baseline as he can. And 1's going to run off of 5's back screen and then to the corner. Of course, if we can get that lay in, we're going to take it. Doesn't happen very often, but you never know. So 3 hits 5, and now we have a nice overload on this side of the floor. Typically, our 4-man was usually, between 6 foot and 6'3". We never had a team that was full of extremely tall players, but we've got now 4 and 2, and both of these guys here, typically on our teams, could shoot it and also drive it. So as 5 catches it, 4 is going to screen down, and he wants to stay above the bottom of this circle or bottom of the key, and 2 puts his head under his rim, knowing that 4 and 2 is going to switch. And here comes 2. And here's the switch. And now 4 leg whips and seals. It's not much of a screen there because we know they're switching. Leg whips and seals and pins X2 as they switched under the basket. And we called this set Bird, B-I-R-D, from Larry Bird from the Celtics. And this was either Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, some of the other great players. That is not a toilet flushing. For the love of cry, we are getting a lot of rain in Northwest Ohio today, which is great because we haven't had rain since JFK was president. So inevitably, X2 will step off slightly to help on this a little bit, and then 2 lifts. There's the guard-to-guard pass, and 2 is going to get an angle, and as 4 reseals and gets out of the lane so he doesn't acquire a 3-second call, we're looking for a post feed here. And then here comes our stagger actions, and we wanted 5 to be the tailpipe or the top of the screen. And another set of advice that we learned from Ryan Peden, the head coach at Illinois State, who's a brilliant teacher of motion offense. We met with him in the fall, and you want to set all your stagger screens on the outer third of the weak side, and that gives these 3 players involved in the stagger screen more room to operate, and it makes it easier for the passer to find the open man. So 2's picked up his dribble, and again, we know they're switching. So as soon as 2 picks his dribble up, here comes 1. He shapes up, and he's going to curl this stagger screen. After we had 3 men in a row, and 1's looking for the ball, 5 pins in 3 and pops. Now we can stretch the floor horizontally if that's available. And 1 is going to finish his cut, sprinting off a 4, and 4 is going to set that screen as far under the basket as possible. Here comes 1. There's your switch. 1's cutting to the corner. Now 4 reseals. 2 hits 1, or 2 can throw it to 4. You've got a nice ball side triangle here. 5 is circled away and is pinning in the closest person, or I should say, who is guarding X3. So we can still stretch the floor horizontally. The ball side triangle. For our biggest teaching point here, besides the footwork on the seal versus the switch, was not getting a 3-second call. So you still have that nice ball side triangle. 1 can stretch the floor horizontally for a drive. If X2 drops back down in here to help on 4, we can hammer the ball back to 2. And we want to really isolate that 4-man now because he has X1 guarding him. One of our biggest offensive emphasis when I coached was get the opposition's point guard in foul trouble in the first period.
So we ran a lot of actions against teams who switched, and we wanted to capitalize on their point guard guarding a bigger, skilled post player. And we always felt like if we could get their point guard in trouble and keep him off the floor and force their second string point guard or another guard to handle the ball, then we could come out and press or extend our zone defense up. So, okay, what happens now if four, for whatever reason, can't get the ball? And I can answer that forever. What that forever reason would be, and this is Coach Rick Van Meter, a Hall of Fame coach in the state of Ohio. His biggest, I was very lucky to be on Coach Van Meter's staff, and what an amazing coach. But the thing Rick taught that I hadn't heard since I played for Coach Platt in college was the first step to post defense is the ball pressure you put on the person with the ball. So if this kid's a heck of an athlete, X2 I'm talking about, is just hawking the heck out of 2, and he can't make that pass. 4 has 2 seconds to receive a post feed. He counts to 2. He takes his right hand, extends it, and points to the pro spot, and he lifts to the pro spot. 2 hits 4 as the ball's in the air from 2 to 4. 3 sliding down, and now we have the same exact action on this side of the court. 3 shapes up. There's your switch. If they don't switch, once we have 2 men in a row, 5 is going to observe how X5 is guarding him. As 3 leaves that 2-man in a row circumstance here, and that's not saying that 3 couldn't flare it or whatever, but let's say he makes a straight cut to the top. 5 is reading how X5 is guarding him. If X5 hedged this, then 5 is going to slip and seal. If X5 zones up, which means he guards the rim, 5 is going to step across his top foot with his left foot and seal the heck out of him. 3 spaces, and we're looking for 5 there. We can, of course, if 3's in here helping, burn the ball across to 3. 5 now has X3 or X5 if they chose not to switch on his back, and he doesn't want to get a 3-second call. 3 now has an angle to throw it into the post. He can stretch the floor horizontally to either 2 or 1. Our stagger action happens the same way, and that is our bird set versus switching. A couple other things we talked about in our book, our ebook, was utilizing a ball side triangle, whether it's inverted or a standard triangle that Coach Bennett, even Tony Bennett, Dick Bennett, and Jack Bennett utilized. When Dick and Jack were coaching. So let's say we're in a standard triangle. 3's going to take the ball, foul line extended. 1, once the ball is foul line extended, drops to a diagonal position to the ball. And now these 3 players are going to operate in the triangle. And if you want to learn about triangle offense, and I'm not talking about Tex Winter's old Chicago Bulls or Lakers triangle, I'm talking about Coach Knight and Coach Bennett's triangle, and UVA does a heck of a job running this triangle stuff. Get with Mike McBride at Holy Cross College in Indiana, in South Bend, Indiana. He is an amazing teacher of triangle, and so is Brooks Miller at Trine University in Angola, Indiana. And Brooks was actually on Coach Knight's staff at Texas Tech. So an inverted triangle would look like this. And this is what Coach Tony Bennett utilizes a lot at UVA. So an inverted triangle, we would have 2 down, 4, and 5. And it's the same principles, but now your triangle is inverted. And we always thought that getting a guard in here was a great way to utilize triangle. If we hadn't force their point guard to pick up a couple fouls in the first period, then what we would do, if no matter if one has the ball or not, but we would have 2 and 4 weak side players here set what we call a Smith screen for one, and he's going to squeeze right in between those two guys. And now 2 is out. 2 and 3 are the feeders. 5, 4, and 1 are in the triangle. And they can operate. There's not a lot of rules. It's just a freelance motion. We've got both of our blockers in here and our point guards working like heck to get the ball. Here, if the ball goes to 1 and he's above foul line extended, that is an automatic 1-4 low. Automatic. We want 1 to go after that point guard, especially if they're switching and he has X4 or X5 on him. So, you can play around with that, and the options are innumerable. But I think those were really simple ways to combat switching, just 2 of the ways we did. We also had a Spartan set and, 10 or 15 other things we did versus switching. But one of the things I stole from Mike McBride, and he told us this when we had Sean Flanagan, and we took him to Tusculum in Tennessee for a visit when Mike was on Coach Boone's staff at Tusculum. And Coach Boone and Mike were unreal teachers of blocker mover. When they went against teams who switched, they pounded into their kids' heads. Just because the defense is switching shouldn't have anything to do with your decision making with the ball. It's all about mismatches. Now, we understood the mismatch aspect of it, but the way they talked to their kids and how to combat switching was really simple. For example, just because they're switching doesn't mean you can't pass the ball efficiently. It doesn't mean you can't penetrate efficiently. It's just finding the gaps. And we took a lot of notes that weekend, I can tell you. But hey, I hope that helps.
Defenses that we used to disguise or confuse other teams. We really never thought a whole lot about confusing other teams. The caliber of coaches that I had to go against in both Indiana and Ohio as a head coach, there was not going to be any confusing any of those guys. But we did do some things to hide or disguise. We were a 2-3 zone team that we stole from Coach Basil Malby, the Hall of Fame coach from Indiana. So we did do some things there. So one of the things that we would do is we would stack our A and B guards, and again, this is defense, and lift our forwards and give ourselves a 1-1-3 look. Out of this look, we could pressure the ball a lot more effectively or more hard than we could out of our flat 2-3. We could pick the ball up higher. And by raising our defense, a lot of people, or raising our forwards, I should say, a lot of coaches would think that we're in a 1-3-1. Coming out of a timeout, we would start our center and then put our 2-man. So now it does look like a 1-3-1 because we have a big, or our biggest player in the middle position of a 1-3-1. As soon as the ball was passed, the first penetrating pass, meaning to the wing, these two guys would switch on the fly, and now we would play our 1-1-3 rules. We could do the same thing out of this alignment. And this takes an extraordinary amount of communication. If you have players who don't talk or don't talk well, this is not for you. We'd pick the ball up, and the only person who knew he had his man was our point guard, our top player. And on the first penetrating pass, The other 4 players would match up, and we would play 5-man free switching up the line, on the line, man to man. The next possession, we might do the same thing, but we would play switching pack line and squeeze everybody in. And again, a lot of it was contingent to who we were playing. If we were playing a team that had outstanding guards and we didn't want to have our closeouts blown up, then we would pack it the whole game. We would go 1-1-3 to a pack line. If we were playing a team that had some bigs or a big, then we would pressure. We would get out and pressure the guards as hard as we could to take their line of sight away and make it as hard as possible for them to throw the thing inside. We could do the same thing out of this alignment. We could play a possession of our 2-3, and we would flow into our 2-3 out of this alignment. This is what we ran against a zone team who had a great point guard who was capable of crossing the midline and firing a pass to the zone to one of the blocks. Since the 2-3 is a little bit more spread out on the baseline, we would have D&E match up there in the block areas with their men, get above them to take that away. We could also play man-to-man out of this. We could play switching man-to-man. We could, within one move, send our 4-man up here and A and C match up with their 2 best guards and play a triangle of 2. We did that a lot. We also did that out of all these alignments where these 4 players could only take 1 step off of their allocated spots in the zone. And on the first pass, here's your chaser. Now, could you do this against a team who can blow up the 3-point line? No. But you can do it against a team who's not such a great shooting team. And there's your box and chaser. So we knew, the coaches in our area knew everything we were going to do. But we just showed you a lot of things, and those are a lot of things to prepare for. So our mantra was kind of, you're either going to prepare for this or you're not. If you don't, we might be able to affect how their kids operate or execute, whether we confuse the coaching staff or not. But those are the things that we relied on to change the tempo of the game per se, or to give the kids on the opposition a different look. So really nothing revolutionary. It's just a lot of planning and a lot of time spent on a marker board with your coaches, figuring stuff out and then finding a way to make it work with your team. And that's one of the things I really enjoy now that I'm retired about Rust Belt Basketball Coaches Network. I get to talk to the best coaches from all over the country and do just this. They get the X and O, and it's fantastic watching these coaches. Man, are they good. They are so good. We cover leadership. We cover philosophy. We cover culture. We cover all of the things now that are in vogue, not just offenses and defenses. So give us a look at www.myrustbeltbasketball.com. Probably haven't heard of us, and that's fine. But you're going to eventually if you're a serious coach. Serious coaches really, really like what we're doing here with Rust Belt Basketball Coaches Network, or RBCN.